I love my country, which is why I refuse to let Donald Trump and Elon Musk destroy it. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. Welcome to the special Valentine's Day edition of Lights On. Thank you for spending your Valentine's Day with me. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel where you are watching this. Lights On is the home for action. Lights On rejects Donald Trump's presidency as illegitimate because of the Constitution. He has no legal authority to be there. Lights On is fearless about investigating and tracking the illegal means by which Donald Trump gained this presidency, fearless about looking into the election anomalies and the ways in which him and Elon Musk and their corrupt allies likely hacked and or rigged this election in his favor. If you've been sick of watching the reporting that has said, well, this is what the American people voted for, this is what they choose, you're in the right place, because we don't accept that premise here on Lights On. We see clearly. We're not going to be gaslit. We're not afraid of confronting the situation and dealing with what needs to be done legally to end this illegal presidency right now that is doing so much damage minute by minute, moment by moment. So welcome to Lights On. We've got a lot. I'm just going to go through today some of the horrors just to crystallize the emergency that we're in and amplify the calls to action as we normally do, and the tools that we have, the constitutional legal levers that we have to end this immediately. It is not right to sit back and tolerate this or wait to take action. The time for action is right now. I also have some very, very important announcements at the end of the show, so please stick around with me until the end. We're going to get to all of that today on Lights On, including a very special message, or maybe we'll call it a segment on love. I want to bring the message of love to this show on Valentine's Day, the real meaning of love, the power of love. Love is no weak emotion. Love is the omnipotent force that holds this world in order, and it is not something to be messed around with. It is real, it is power, and so we're going to bring out the real power of love today on Lights On, and I hope you all join me in celebrating that. I want to start off. I'm going to bring in the action calls pretty quickly, but I want to start off with what I titled this video with, and that is that $80 million theft. $80 million theft of funds from the state of New York. There was some very good reporting last night by Chris Hayes on this story. If you haven't heard it, you need to hear it again. I can't believe that. Of course, we're talking about there's just so many 5-alarm fires going on that it's hard to keep track of all of them. And frankly, they want you to be afraid. They want you to be distraught. Don't fall into that trap. You know, some people say the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is fear. And they want to make you afraid. Do not let them make you afraid, but you do need to be alert. You do need to take action. We cannot sit on this for a second. Yesterday, Donald Trump and Elon Musk stole $80 million in funding authorized by Congress from a bank account owned and in place for the city of New York, for the citizens of New York, and for the operation of that city. $80 million stolen from that bank account. Let me just go through Chris Hayes' reporting and describe to you how this happened. First of all, this $80 million was part of a grant from the Shelter and Services Program, which is a part of the government that's administered by FEMA. It is not FEMA itself, it's administered by FEMA, and it's initiated by Congress. So they were issued an $80 million grant under the Shelter and Services Program to provide services to migrants who have been released from federal custody after crossing the border. Now, this is a humanitarian issue. It is a national security issue. It is an issue that taking care of these people keeps the people of New York safe. It keeps law and order. It is a service on multiple fronts that at the end of the day, costs New York City a mere $12.50 a night to house people. $12.50. But in the intense gaslighting, the abuse of our federal funds by the richest man in the world to claim that he is now the one in charge of monitoring the United States of America's funding and what we spend our money on. In their gaslighting, they attacked this service that the New York City was granted with, this money that they were granted, as some vast waste of taxpayer funds given by FEMA. Now, what happened was this money was appropriated by a vote in Congress, approved by Joe Biden. This is all legally given and legally set into stone. This money cannot just be taken back legally. It is theft, what has happened. So it was given by Joe, signed and approved by Congress and President Joe Biden. And despite those facts, within hours of a post by Elon Musk attacking this and totally misportraying this as some housing of migrants in luxury hotels, as though we're spending hundreds or thousands of dollars a night to house them, which it wasn't at all. $12.50 a night is what it really was. Within hours of tweeting this false post, the Trump White House fired FEMA's chief financial officer and 3 others for their roles in dispersing those funds to New York City. And then Kristi Noem tweeted out, Kristi Noem, dog shooting head of the Department of Homeland Security, it's unthinkable, tweeted out that they were clawing back $80 million from the New York City bank account. And they did just that. Stole $80 million out of a bank account that they had deposited it into for New York City, that they were legally contracted to receive as appropriated by Congress and signed by President Joe Biden. Elon Musk and Donald Trump did this. Elon Musk, whose minions, whose 19 to 23-year-old hackers, not auditors, coders, not people who go through and have any expertise on waste and abuse, but hackers and coders who have infiltrated Treasury, clawed back this money. Is your bank account next? Because God knows they have your bank account information. They have your social security numbers. They have everybody's information. And I'm going to get kind of at the end to the lack of urgency from some federal judges on this issue. With all the lawsuits that have been filed, the temporary restraining orders that have been asked for by the litigants and the people who are bravely stepping forward, there have been some wonderful actions from judges, but there have been some others that are frankly terrifying, with a lack of understanding the emergency that we're in. So do we have time? Do we have time to just sit back and try to mitigate this disaster, this complete hijacking of our law, our money, what belongs to us, we the people? Or do we have to take action right now? There's already evidence from multiple judges that Donald Trump and indications that he is defying court orders. This latest one that I saw is in regards to a climate funding bill. He, of course, is refusing to continue the funding that has been ordered by federal judges and instead blocking climate funding. This is just the latest. When you defy court orders, there is no longer a separation of power. One of the individuals who is standing out in this moment, and if you watch Lights On, that the theme of this show is stand out. Okay, it's what we have to do. It's a chapter in Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. And one individual, despite my grievance with every single member of Congress for not upholding their oath on January 6th, one member of Congress that is standing out and calling for immediate action on this lawlessness is Representative Al Green. Now, he already filed impeachment articles over Trump's comments on Gaza, his intent and declaration of plans to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And over the past couple of days, he has heightened those calls and is very, very clear about the stakes and what he will do, in particular, in light of Donald Trump's defiance of court orders. Here's Representative Al Green.
If a president defies a court order or court orders, that president has committed an impeachable act. It is an impeachable act to defy your oath of office, to execute the laws, to honor the laws of the United States, to protect the Constitution. You are charged with the responsibility of defending the Constitution. If you do this, Mr. President, you will now have committed an impeachable act. And the question is not whether you will be impeached by way of a resolution being presented, not whether a resolution will be presented, because you know that I'm going to present that resolution. I'm telling you now that I will present the resolution. You defy court orders, and I will present resolutions to impeach you. I will present the resolution. Now the question is, will the Congress act? What will the Congress do? I believe that even some of the most conservative members of Congress will recognize that we don't want a dictatorship, that if we don't act, we will have a dictatorship. The consequences of our inaction, the consequences of our failure to impeach and convict would be a dictatorship. I don't believe that the Congress of the United States of America, I don't believe that the Senate of the United States of America will stand by and watch a dictatorship develop while they are in office. This is our watch. I don't believe that on our watch we have such persons who are going to simply stand by. There may be some, but I believe there will be enough to impeach, and I believe there will be enough to convict, because no one in this country, I believe, wants a dictatorship.
That is what we need to hear so much more of. Normalizing the conversation about this, understanding that what this is dictatorship. And you know what? I agree with him. Although some people have come out and said, you know what, some of MAGA does want a dictator. I can tell you from having lived in the vortex of Fox News that's trying to normalize this insanity, this criminality, this constitutional obliteration that we're witnessing, that their audience doesn't really want dictatorship. They're sold on these people being for freedom. They're sold on these people protecting your personal information. As a former Fox News viewer, you know what I'll tell you? I'll tell you that for years, they were obsessed with government oversight and Big Brother and, the Orwellian threat of the deep state. We have never seen more of a deep state threat than we see right now with this so-called Department of Government Efficiency, non-existent department. Communicate to your friends who are believing this for 1 second that their privacy is completely being invaded by people who couldn't give a shit about them, by people who have incredible things to lose by not having this power. Yeah, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world who has a hell of a lot to lose if his companies are reined in and there are actual regulations on what he's doing and the business that he's carrying out and his government contracts. Donald Trump, we know, had everything to lose. His personal freedom, because he's a criminal. A jail cell is where he belongs. So this man for sure had everything to lose. And instead of these people being where they belong, they are controlling our government for their personal benefit. Nothing is a better example of the collapse of the rule of law than what we've seen over the past 24 hours also in New York. I mean, they're really going to work in New York right now. I'm sure you've heard that there is an exodus of prosecutors over the decision of the Trump Department of Injustice, run by hatchet for hire Pam Bondi, to drop the indictment of Eric Adams. Now, isn't it ironic? Mayor Eric Adams of New York City, was indicted for bribery, for being bribed by the Turkish government, by our Department of Justice. And now the Trump administration is dropping those charges by bribing him once again. Crime upon crime upon crime. And people at the DOJ, including, I will tell you in a moment, people just appointed by Donald Trump, are resigning in droves over this. You've probably heard the 7th prosecutor today resigned and called out Trump's former lawyer, who's Emile Beauvais, who is just wreaking havoc at the Department of Justice. Trump's former lawyer, who he now has installed at DOJ, was called out in a scathing letter by one of the prosecutors, Hagen Scotton. He's the 7th person to resign. He wrote in a letter to Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais. He said this was a dismissal with leverage. Now, of course, Donald Trump is dismissing without prejudice, meaning these charges can be rebrought, the corruption charges against Eric Adams. So specifically, I mean, it's spelled out. So he will engage in a quid pro quo and do their bidding as it relates to immigration enforcement in New York City. It's plain as day. They're literally talking about it without masking it at all on Fox News. Homan, the ICE director, and Eric Adams are literally sitting next to each other on Fox News bragging about this illegal quid pro quo. So the prosecutor, Hagen Scotton, in this letter where he called this scheme, this absolutely unthinkable illegal scheme to drop these charges, a dismissal with leverage, as he said, a dismissal with leverage. He said, any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less officials in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. No system of ordered liberty can allow the government to use the carrot of dismissing charges or the stick of threatening to bring them again to induce an elected official to support its policy objectives. And yet that's exactly what they are doing. Listen to the predicate there. No system of ordered liberty can allow the government to do this. Reverse logic, we allow the government to do this, we lose our liberty. And that's what's happening before our eyes. As the Democratic leaders go out there and get on their high horse about their outrage about the things that are going on a daily basis, it has to be rooted out. It has to be removed. These people have to be taken out of power right now. Right now, the blood of democracy is on each of their hands for their failure on January 6th. They have an opportunity for atonement. They have an opportunity to join Representative Al Green, to change the conversation, to let everybody know, every single Republican and Democrat who dares on any holiday honoring our servicemen and women to celebrate them, to celebrate their sacrifice, who will then not support the immediate removal of this coup on American democracy. They need to be called out. They need to be brought to that standard that Al Green was talking about. The understanding, the normalization of the conversation that this is dictatorship and it has to be stopped right now. I want to play another clip from my interview this week with John Bonifaz of Free Speech for People. He's the constitutional scholar and head of that organization who I'm so grateful to know him, so grateful he's a friend of the show, so grateful for his clarity on these constitutional issues. And Free Speech for People started a petition the day that Donald Trump was illegally put into that office to have him impeached based simply upon his emoluments violations, because that in itself is a massive constitutional violation that we're basically just taking as a given this second time round. And it has been amended to include, I think, up to a dozen counts of impeachment at this point. It has gotten over 200,000 signatures. Now, that's as of before our interview. A lot of people have seen the interview, not nearly enough. I'm going to post the link after this live in the description. Maybe one of our mods can put the link to that video in the description now. Please, when you're done with this live, Watch that show, sign the petition. Here is John Bonifaz's call to action.
It is a duty of anyone in Congress who dares to continue to believe in the Constitution and the rule of law and our democracy, is their duty to stand up and join Congressman Green in demanding that the impeachment process be used. Look, Jessica, we either have a Constitution or we do not. And that's really what's at stake right now. We either have Section 3 of the 14th Amendment or we don't. We either have an impeachment clause or we don't. We either have the rule of law or we don't. I recognize that people will say, well, the votes are not there to pass an impeachment inquiry resolution or articles of impeachment. Honestly, that's not the question right now. The question is, we need to build this conversation and this debate as to whether or not we're going to allow this occupant of the Oval Office to continue to trample on the Constitution without any demand for accountability for the high crimes he continues to commit.
Are we just going to let this continue to happen day by day? More high crimes and misdemeanors being carried out at our expense? Or are we going to take action right now to stop it? There's one article that I've been referencing a lot because I think we need to constantly look to both history, not so distant history, and recent history for examples of how bad it can get and what we need to do now, and take those lessons and put them into practice. This is a very good piece that I highly recommend from Zach Beaucamp at Vox called "Their Democracy Died. They Have Lessons for America About Trump's Power Grab." Hungarians who lived through Viktor Orban's 2010 power grab warn Americans, act now before it's too late. Before it's too late, because it will be too late, and the damage will have to be, it will take years, if not generations, to restore what we have lost. The time to act is right now. So I want to, before giving you a few more calls to action other than signing that petition, I want to share with you a few of the other things, because this is just infecting so many. If we can just go through a list of some of the headlines that we've had just this week, it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. This is one in particular really gets me as an artist. You know what's happening at the Kennedy Center, where Donald Trump stripped the executive board of the Kennedy Center, installed himself and people like Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, Usha Vance, the J.D. Vance's wife, Dan Scavino, his social media manager, are now on the board of the Kennedy Center. And here's the headline: Kennedy Center staff describe climate of fear as events drop from calendar. Of course, comedian Issa Rae pulled her own show. There's another in this piece I'm reading from the Washington Post. There's another musical that was about, I think it was called Finn, about a fish that was just different and trying to fit in. And that, of course, was a little, I guess, too woke for the Kennedy Center now. And they reneged that contract, and that musical will no longer be playing there. It's a hostile takeover of culture, of government, of humanitarian work. The horrors at USAID are almost, they are truly beyond the pale, as one person described. It's like Benghazi times 10, the destruction that has been caused by the stripping of funding and manpower and just complete chaos at USAID. I'm going to read from one excerpt out of a lawsuit, one of the USAID lawsuits that was filed this week. It says, the chaos of the Trump administration's haphazard and extra-constitutional shutdown of USAID has caused my family and me immense emotional distress by contributing to the already intense sense of panic and uncertainty of the rise in Kinshasa. I'm going to be mispronouncing this, Kinshasa. This is a story of a USAID worker that was in another country where there were violent protests going on, and they were cut off from the evacuation resources that they needed from the US government to get out of a violent situation in another country. So this isn't even other citizens or other people from other countries that this is affecting. This is affecting American citizens who are working on behalf of the US government, who are put in life threatening situations overseas, and they were deprived of the resources for safe evacuation. My family has left behind our home and all our belongings as a result of our service to the United States of America overseas, and we have been harassed through a combination of malignant, violent rhetoric and threats of financial ruin from the officials affecting this shutdown. I mean, that is just one story, one horror story out of USAID. There are many, many more about the unthinkable effects it's going to have on women and children who are provided services, reproductive health care services, other life-saving services from the work that USAID does. The damage that they are doing is truly unthinkable. Here's a few more headlines from this week. OPM staffers fired en masse on conference call as part of Musk purge. Putin-Trump phone call shows Europe's time is over because, Europe's the real enemy, not the criminal who's been indicted by the International Criminal Court for committing genocide, Vladimir Putin. He's not the enemy. Europe is the enemy. Here's another one. Elon Musk is breaking the national security system. Dodgy's takeover of federal agencies is a counterintelligence crisis. I just want to read one paragraph from this story. This is in The Atlantic by Shane Harris. It says, the legion of Elon Musk acolytes who have set up shop inside federal agencies in the past few weeks do not appear to have been subjected to anything approaching rigorous scrutiny. President Trump, illegal president, has also nominated to key national security positions people whose personal and financial histories contain at least caution flags. That's understatement of the century. This deviation from past practice has created a new kind of counterintelligence predicament. Rather than staying on high alert for hidden threats, the counterintelligence monitors have to worry about the people in charge. This is a week that Russian asset Tulsi Gabbard is confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Lunatic Robert F. Kennedy is now the head of HHS. We have a hatchet for hire running the Justice Department. We have a sexually abusive alcoholic as the Department of Defense Secretary. We're about to confirm another joke of an individual deemed not credible by courts and with an enemies list, who has written children's books about Donald Trump being a king, Kash Patel, to lead the FBI. It's truly, truly, I don't need to tell you, you know all these things. The question is, when are we going to stop it, and how long are we going to tolerate it? And I think that amount of time has to be none. We have to have zero tolerance for any of this. So in that light, I want to tell you a few things that I know going on over the next few days and over the next few weeks. I talked with John in that interview about the messaging at protests. Now we can pressure our members of Congress, which we absolutely need to do. We need to pressure them to normalize the conversation about impeachment and removal now. Every single one of them, Republican and Democrat, let them know that their legacy will basically be the legacy of either Hitler and Joseph Goebbels or their enablers, unless they change course like right now. But we also need to be messaging that ourselves when we go to these protests. It can't just be, we reject this, we won't stand for it, they're awful people. It has to be action-oriented. It has to be impeach and remove, get them out now, use the legal levers now. Like John said, we either have a constitution or we don't. The next major protest that I know about is on February 17th across this country. It's kind of another 50 states, 50 protests. If you can, get yourself to your state capital on Monday, on President's Day. We've got an illegitimate president illegal president. So go and protest on this Not My President President's Day and demand at those protests, have a sign that says impeach and remove. And impeach and remove Trump and Vance for that matter. Vance is clearly aiding and abetting the illegal actions of Donald Trump. Vance is saying that Donald Trump should not be impeached, but the judges who he is defying should be impeached. That's the conversation that they are trying to have. Speaking of the judges and the effect, I believe, in some corners, this is having on the judiciary. I just want to put up some reporting I saw today that was really alarming, and I want to call it out because there can't be any patience for fear coming out of our judiciary, and fear from judges that we would not expect it from. These are Obama and Biden appointees that I'm about to tell you about what was coming out of their courtroom today. This is from Kyle Cheney at Politico. Let me just pull up this thread from Blue Sky. This is from a few hours ago. Judge Chutkan was holding a hearing on state AG's effort to stop Elon Musk and Doge's entire government operation. The lawyer for New Mexico, one of those AGs, said Musk is, quote, a literal wrecking ball. And he reported from the courthouse that Judge Chutkan seems skeptical of the urgency of an immediate restraining order, which is what they were asking for, a temporary restraining order in this hearing. And then he followed it up about an hour later with Chutkan is not buying the demand for extraordinary emergency relief. The states might have a case, she says, but not necessarily for an immediate restraining order. The states say Musk likes to work the weekend, so he might cause harm this weekend. Obviously, he's causing harm every second that he's there. Chutkan says that's not enough. Wow, Judge Chutkan, what is going on in your courtroom? We, of course, know Judge Chutkan was one of the most powerful voices to push back against Trump when she was overseeing the January 6th case, the case that should have never been dismissed, the case for which Donald Trump should be in prison for his crimes against democracy. And here she's saying it's not a serious enough situation to have a temporary restraining order against Elon Musk and his hackers in Treasury. Could there be any more of a serious emergency to take action right now? Other reporting from DC, from Kyle over at Politico. It's from another courtroom. This one is the Biden appointee. She said, Judge Reyes, she said, according to him, tore into the lawyers for fired IGs. This is another hearing for all of those inspector generals that Donald Trump illegally fired without giving Congress 30-day notice. So she tore into their lawyers, saying they waited 21 days to file suit and then demanded emergency same-day relief. She forced them to withdraw their TRO motion and threatened them with sanctions. Okay, listen, I don't know why they waited 21 days. I don't know if they had to get certain legal things together. I don't know if they had to get parties together. I don't know if there was other things making them wait 21 days. But I mean, my God, threatening them with sanctions, these people who were just fired, the people who keep our government from being corrupt and unethical, who were just fired en masse by this illegal president so that he can commit crimes without any oversight. Their lawyers were threatened with sanctions. I mean, what the hell? What the hell? It is not a time for judges to be afraid. There was another judge, let's just turn it to the positive, this week, or possibly last week, the one who immediately ordered that Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship was unconstitutional. I think his name was I'm going to get it wrong, and I don't have it in front of me, but he's a Reagan appointee in his 80s, and he was very, very clear about having no tolerance for the abdication of the rule of law in his courtroom. No tolerance whatsoever. We need more judges like that. We can't have any kind of turning of things on their head or lack of the acknowledgement of the emergency that we're in right now by other judges. I cited an article very early after the election, I think while I was still on Midas Touch, that referenced the collapse of the rule of law in Germany in the 30s. And it basically highlighted how it hinged on judges and lawyers. Judges and lawyers. Without the enabling, the complicity of judges and lawyers, it would have never been possible. So everybody has a role in this right now. Judges, lawyers, congresspeople, law enforcement, military. I'm going to share something with you that, listen, it's on everybody's mind, and we don't avoid tough subjects here on Lights On. This is one of our viewers shared this with me because we know that every member of our military, like our lawmakers, like the people that are in positions of public service, have sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. And there was a memorandum that the Joint Force, the 8 chiefs of the Joint Staff, put out in early 2021 in the wake of the Capitol attack, the insurrection initiated by Donald J. Trump. And they said this, and my God, do we need this to hold now more than ever. U.S. military will obey lawful orders from civilian leadership, support civil authorities to protect lives and property, ensure public safety in accordance with the law, and remain fully committed to protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They have an obligation to our Constitution. They have an obligation to the rule of law. Everybody in power who has sworn an oath to that Constitution has that duty. And I genuinely hope that we are thinking of every legal, peaceful means to enforce that duty right now. We have to do it right now. We don't have any time to waste. Another thing that was shared with me that I thought was very interesting was a directive, kind of an explanation of what can be done, because there are so many federal laws being broken right now. I had a discussion with Richard Painter, the ethics lawyer from the Bush White House. Wonderful guy. Also highly suggest you go back and watch that video. It's called The Case for Arresting Elon Musk, and it's on the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. But our conversation was centered on the federal laws, the criminal statutes that are being violated, and the failure that we know will take place under the current leadership of the DOJ. And this was shared for me from the Department of Justice website. Maybe it's a screenshot from before the takeover, but here's what it says. Federal law holds law enforcement officers liable for failing to intervene when they witness other officers violate a person's constitutional rights. This is known as a failure to intervene claim. How can an officer be held liable? If the officer knew that a person's rights were being violated, the officer had the opportunity to intervene, and the officer chose not to intervene. How are these claims brought? Civil lawsuits are brought under 42 U.S.C. 1983. Write that down, 42 U.S.C. 1983. Action can also be brought under common law tort principles. Some examples of failure to intervene are supervisory officers who observe excessive force but do not stop it, officers who actively engage in excessive force but do not directly participate in it. The case here is that there are federal laws that are being violated, and there's not going to be any federal enforcement against them, because this is no longer a Department of Justice for the American people. It's a Department of Injustice for Donald Trump and Elon Musk's crime syndicate. So I am not an expert on 42 U.S.C. 1983, but I do believe that there are civil remedies that people need to be thinking of, using very creative ways, fearlessly pursuing every legal, peaceful means through the avenues of the courts and the law while we still have them. We have to pull out every single stop. I'm going to share with you, it's Black History Month. And it's really sick what they're attempting to do to erase the history of this country in so many ways. One of our viewers shared with me, actually, I don't have the screenshot up, but it was an attack on DEI from Elon Musk back in January, where he said a certain amount of people were going to have to die in plane crashes for DEI to go away. How many plane crashes have there been since Donald Trump took office? But this is a very sick, racist, white nationalist attack on our country. There's so many racist undertones. The whole migration thing, let me just point this out. If anybody, if any Republican, any pundit on Fox News had a shred of sincerity about caring about the migrant or immigration crisis in this country, you know what they could do? They could start advocating the sanctioning and penalization of the predominantly white business owners that illegally hire the people in this country. It's supply and demand. It's a really simple equation. If you don't like illegal immigration, then cut it off at its source. Prosecute, fine the people who are drawing in the workers from other countries. That's really, really simple solution. But of course, it's really not about immigration. It's about fascism. It's about trying to get us to be afraid of one another, to divide us along ethnic and racial lines. There's so many things in Black history in particular that teach us about this moment in their struggles in this country, having suffered so many injustices, even as we declared independence on the premise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, how much injustice the Black community has faced and fought to overcome. And I just want to, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about how severe and unjust what they have suffered has been throughout our history, and how for so many years it was just thought it was just unthinkable that we would get past it, like slavery. Like slavery was just, as a business that, God forbid, we upend this really lucrative American trade. And it would never happen until it happened, until people said, we're not standing for this inhumanity, this insanity anymore. And then it became the pariah that, of course, it always was. Same thing with segregation. Same thing with any injustice. It was okay and it was normal until people stopped being willing to normalize it, until they demanded that the conversation be changed, and they made the sacrifice and took the fearless action that was required to not let it be normal anymore. One of my heroes is Dr. Martin Luther King. It was obviously appalling that his Memorial Day was marred by the illegal inauguration of Donald Trump. I want to play this one clip of him that was shared with me back on that week in the theme of love and in the theme of power and action. Listen to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King.
What happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites. So that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. It was this misinterpretation that caused the philosopher Nietzsche, who was the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. Now, we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.
I love that so much. Love correcting everything that stands against love. I got to share this other quote from you. It's from Mary Baker Eddy, an extraordinary Christian pioneer who founded a international newspaper before women even had the right to vote in this country. And she said this about love. Love is not something put upon a shelf to be taken down on rare occasions with sugar tongs and laid on a rose leaf. I make strong demands on love, call for active witnesses to prove it, and noble sacrifices and grand achievements as its results. Unless these appear, I cast aside the word as a sham and counterfeit, having no ring of the true metal. And I share that, and I share Martin Luther King's words with you because there are so many people in power who would claim to love this country. That love demands action, and it demands action right now. It demands force. It demands fearlessness. I think I've shared this with you before. One of my favorite movies is V for Vendetta, and I love that scene in V for Vendetta where I think it's Edie. I may be getting her name wrong, but the character played by Natalie Portman, she's sitting in her prison cell and she's been writing letters and crying and so traumatized. And there's a guard standing outside her cell. And through this harrowing process of writing letters to this other prisoner, she realizes that she no longer has anything to fear. And that realization that she has nothing left to fear is literally her freedom. And she looks outside of that prison cell that she's been sitting in and sees that the guard is a mannequin. The guard has just been a figment. His power has literally been a figment of her imagination all along. That's the result of realizing that you have nothing to fear. We all have to get to that point, like now. We got to get ourselves to that point of fearlessness and act from that standpoint. Be totally, totally fearless. If we do that, there is literally nothing that can take away our freedom. So please, please join me in doing that in every single way. Call for impeachment, normalize the conversation, show up at these protests, demand that that action be taken. Join the other economic boycotts. I know there's another one going on February 28th. February 28th, blackout, consumer blackout. Not particularly hard for me. I've had a joke with my family my whole life because I don't like to buy things I don't need. We joke that I have a shopping disorder. So that won't be particularly hard for me because I don't like buying stuff. But for anybody, just put in that little bit of self-sacrifice. Anytime we're sacrificing materialism, it's got to be healthy. So let's do it for one day on February 28th. I know we're going to do it again on March 15th, but honestly, that's so far ahead of time. We really need to focus on right now, every single day, normalizing the conversation to get these people out of here and to get them out now. And that is love. That is love in action. I promised with one of our viewers to share one other thing with you. I know there's so many assaults that they're trying to force through. One that I think we should be paying attention to without losing sight of the bigger picture, and I'll get to that bigger picture, is this egregious quote unquote SAVE Act that they're trying to push through Congress right now. They have said it's a priority of this Republican-led Congress, and it is a so-called voter integrity law disguised as election integrity, but it is really a massive, massive assault on voting rights. I'll read from one article on the SAVE Act. Americans, this is a quote from a public policy group. Americans would need to appear in person with original documentation to even simply update their voter registration information for a change of address or a change in party affiliation under this law. These impacts alone would set voter registration, sophistication, and technology back by decades and would be unworkable for millions of Americans, including more than 60 million people who live in rural areas. Additionally, the driver's licenses, including real IDs, the ones that you have to, submit your birth certificate and everything else to get, as well as military or tribal IDs, would not be sufficient forms of documentation to prove citizenship under the legislation. As one example, when Kansas implemented a proof of citizenship requirement, more than 31,000 otherwise eligible voters were blocked from registering. And this obviously disproportionately falls on people of color and the elderly. If enacted at the federal level, the SAVE Act could prevent millions of eligible voters from participating in elections, reinforcing structural inequalities. Now, here's a crazy part. You probably heard about this if you've heard about the SAVE Act. They are literally trying to get through this act to only allow people to register if their birth certificate matches their current last name. Now, you're going to understand the problem there for women in this country. Women in this country traditionally do not keep their birth name as their last name. So under this SAVE Act, as many as 69 million women who have changed their last name to match their spouses do not have a birth certificate matching their legal name and could be denied access to register to vote. Just utter insanity in the name of preventing non-citizens from voting, which is a non-existent problem in this country. Literally non-existent. It occurs on a minute scale. But of course, another element of fascism. Now that's if we can even conceive of having another legitimate election again. Because we know that this election was not right. We have covered it on this show. The failure to address the very real possibility that this election was hacked, to address the data analyses that show what is known as a Russian tail. When certain election results were coming in, it reached a point where the results just completely stopped mirroring anything that was organic distribution, because there's indication that manipulation took place. Of course, I've had Election Truth Alliance on the show. We platformed them the night before January 6th. They have continued to grow and expand and had so many other analysts and people with expertise in this space, not conspiracy theorists. This is a people-led movement, a data-led movement. Understand and highlight why this election was off. And if we just pass by this election without addressing it, God help us if we think that we're actually going to have another legitimate election in this country with voter suppression, with the influence of Elon Musk. Somebody in the chat said, Jessica, please acknowledge that Elon's kid said that he knew how to hack the election. I acknowledge it. We put it on that show when we had Nathan from Election Truth Alliance on that night. It was the opening to that show was the clip with Elon's kid. We completely acknowledge it. There have been way too many connections. There was reporting this week that Ethan Chotran, I think that's his name, one of Elon Musk's henchmen, these young henchmen, was part of a group behind software called Ballot Proof that has the ability to detect ballot images and possibly manipulate them. So all these connections are coming together. This is not shocking. It's pretty widely acknowledged by most people in the mainstream right now that there are hackers Elon Musk has hackers literally working in our federal agencies. So let's just put 2 and 2 together and understand that he had that same capability to influence the election results. There have been articles very recently from election security experts saying, where are the audits? Every healthy democracy does audits. Where are the audits? We haven't even conducted risk-limiting audits in this country with all of the red flags that we had. That is not a circumstance under which a democracy can survive. It is not. So we absolutely of our work cut out for us. But guess what? We have love behind us. And love is the most powerful and only true power in this world. And so if we understand that, I truly, truly believe that we cannot be stopped and that our liberty cannot be taken from us. So please join me in acting from that premise. I'm going to share something kind of personal with you. I promise you I was going to share some things at the end. I got some pretty unthinkable news today out of a case that I've been working on for 7 years against the Trump campaign. If you know me and you know this show, you know that I am responsible for annihilating Donald Trump's NDA in court. That fight was an outgrowth of my initial human rights lawsuit in New York City, a human rights lawsuit that was supplemented with a retaliation claim for the terrorism that I was subjected to over the past 6 to 7 years from Donald Trump and his allies, for speaking my mind, for asserting my free speech rights as an American citizen. And I got news today out of a New York state court that my entire case was dismissed. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I will absolutely be appealing that decision. It was completely unthinkable and completely wrong. The same judge that dismissed that today gave an opinion in 2021 as to why my supplemented claim of retaliation had merit. And it is such a black and white case. I mean, I was literally terrorized by these people for years for bringing a human rights claim. So I absolutely will be fighting back. It's been a few years since I've been through the roller coaster of legal decisions. And I will tell you, it hit me like a ton of bricks a few hours ago when I got that news. But in those few hours, that weight, that fear has, like it always does with the amazing support of those who love me, turned to fire and motivation and fearlessness. And you better believe I will be appealing that decision and continuing on with this fight. I really need your support now more than ever. I'm going to ask you to support me and help me at thejessicadenson.com/donate, thejessicadenson.com/donate. And I want to thank you all so much for supporting me all along, for being together with me in this fight that was never optional for me. I said silence was not an option. Standing up for my country in this moment in history when everything is on the line and we seem to be losing it second by second has never been an option for me. And I know it's not an option for you either. And that's why you're here. And so to have you with me in this fight is so incredible and so beautiful. And I want to tell you, especially on a day like today, on Valentine's Day, and every day, how alone you are not, how much you are surrounded by love. Please know that, each and every one of you, how much the power of love and each one of us supports each other and is with you. Please know that you are not alone. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining me today. Let's remember those dates. February 17th, get out with your signs to impeach and remove Trump at your state capitol at noon. February 28th, mass boycott, another one coming up on March 15th. Hope to have more announcements for you soon. Go watch that video with John Bonifaz. I'll post it as soon as I hop off here. Sign that petition to impeach Trump. Demand that the conversation for their immediate removal be normalized right now. I love you all so much. Stand out, my friends. thejessicadenson.com. Please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. Have a wonderful weekend and never, ever, ever stop letting your light shine.